So good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on this webinar. We are going to run through some topics. We're going to have a discussion amongst ourselves on how to define and measure your ROI and find the best use case for that to meet an ROI. Being flexible with the direction of your use case, because we'll go into why you always need to be not too defined in what direction you're going in. Knowing what XR technologies are right for your use case, knowing what optimization is required of your data to fit your use case, and the problems faced when your data is not optimized for your XR. Now, to do some introductions today, I'm joined with Dev, who's in his home office. That we've just commented on what a lovely clean area it is. Dev's been with Theorem a number of years. He's been involved in the XR industry for 9 years. He's probably the most experienced in this sort of topic. He's worked with multiple companies in the UK and in Sweden, and he's got the battle scars to prove how to do it and how not to do it. And also, we're joined by Mark Davey, our colleague over in the US. Mark's been with Theorem for 12 years, so he's familiar with all the product range from the translation through to 3D PDF and sort of more recently XR. And he looks after Valiant, one of our longer term users. So he's got some good experience on how they've employed XR for solving problems and a number of use cases they've used it for. Now, we did have a video that we were going to run as we were talking, so you wouldn't just have to look at our charming faces for the next 30 minutes, but we've had some problem with some lag. So when the recording goes out, there will be some video attached to it that you can watch at your leisure, and it'll explain a bit more what we're talking about. So apologies for that, but we've had a few issues that we've been running through. So the first topic of today is measuring your ROI. But first I want to introduce Theorem. So for those of you not familiar with Theorem Solutions, we've been in business over 30 years now. We were originally formed as a translation company, so taking any CAD package, any CAD data and translating it over to another CAD, so CATIA to NX, and also lightweight formats. So NX, a bad example there, NX to STEP or CATIA to JT. And then we built on that core technology of working with the CAD vendors, because we work very closely, we partner with all the major CAD vendors, and embedding CAD data into 3D PDF documents, so making your CAD data portable without needing CAD licenses. So we have lots of webinars on that, so please take a look at those. And then again, building another layer on top of that, so into XR, so AR, MR and VR. And it's really all about the fact that we have really good technicians that understand CAD, understand the data that's available in CAD, and porting that over and optimizing it suitable for the right devices in XR or the right use case. So we'll go over the first topic, which is measuring the ROI, selecting the best use case. And I'm going to go to Dev on that, because he's gone through a number of these. And it's a tricky starting point with companies. If you pick the wrong use case as an engineer that wants to bring this in, it will fall over very quickly if you've not got the right use case to present to management. So Dev, a few of your highlights, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So I want to kick things off by talking about the most important thing when you're thinking about adopting XR technology. And that's the most important thing before you even think about optimization, before you even think about devices or investing in any XR hardware or software, is identifying your use case. That's the most important thing that I found in my career. By understanding your use case, it will help you decide what devices you need and what applications and how you can get the most value from that. So there's a number of ways you can sort of get your use case. I know some customers buy a device and they won't know where to use it, or how to use it. They'll play around with it, they'll experiment, but then after a year or so, it's in the back of the room gathering dust and not being used. But to identify a use case, there's a couple of ways. So you can just look at your current design cycle, look at where the challenges were, where the problems were. If you've already released a product, look at where there were recalls, for example, and just understand where the challenges were. Were there things like late design changes in a particular area or department? Were there recalls? Where were these recalls? And understand why these problems occurred. So was it because of limited or out-of-date physical prototypes? Did you not get a chance to test enough? Was there a lack of communication or collaboration between the teams? If you're looking at a factory layout, maybe there wasn't a physical facility available for you to go out and test in. So try and look at your business cycle and look at where the challenges are, understand the pain points, and that's where you want to try and focus on where you want to sort of utilize XR, because that's where you're going to get the most return on investment.
I think the next one I'll throw to Mark was some of the accepted benefits of XR, where you've seen, if you put XR against this use case, it's going to win. So over to you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Well, the first one that comes to mind is just our visualization app and taking the virtual model and placing it over the physical model. And we've had great success with this with one of our customers. And this gives them the ability to, obviously for quality checks, but really to inspect the tooling and maybe the components prior to being shipped or customer acceptance. And, you look at it from one aspect, really ensures that the parts that are being shipped are as they were designed. So as shipped is as designed. And that has been a huge, huge use case for, as I say, the majority of our customers. One has even said that it saved them almost or reduced 60% in inspection time of these tools prior to shipment. So imagine taking 60%, and putting that back into your workforce. So that's the one that I would highly recommend and look at.
Dev mentioned collaboration there, and one of the things we've seen with another one of our UK customers, they had a return on investment in under 3 months, and that was really just being able to remove travel. So they used to go through a number of iterations with prototypes and get engineers from around the world to sit around a prototype and interrogate it. And for the first 2 or 3 iterations now, they do this in collaboration on a number of devices. So they're all on mixed devices. And just taking that expense and that time, we've all sat in the airport reading a book that we didn't really want to be reading. And look, it's just how much downtime and how much travel cost is taken out. So that was the first one for them. The other one I always think of is de-risking. How nice it is to be able to be confident with your design and that you've signed it off. It's going to production as complete as you can possibly make it. So you want to be able to sleep at night and go, I hope this bloody works. Excuse my French. So de-risking and also speed of change. There's always a last minute change, and then you've got to delay a project because you've got to get everybody together. So it's back to the travel a bit as well. But if I've got an issue and I'm not sure if I have a small problem or a large problem, how are we going to solve this? Within 10 minutes, you can dial everybody in, get a collaborative session going and get some second opinions on it, rather than when are you available? I'm available next Thursday. I'm available in 3 weeks. And the problem's just sitting there and you're mulling it over until you can get together and resolve it, where 10 minutes time, you've all joined a session, you've ironed out the issue and you can move on. And just to finish off on this section, so when you're looking at ROI, if you go to the area website, they have an ROI calculator there that helps you through this process and will help you identify some good use cases as well. And also on the Microsoft HoloLens site, they have an estimator. And I think if you use those two tools together, you'll have a fair idea of what direction you want to go in. So that leads into the use cases. And I think the next topic is really being more flexible in the direction of your use case. What you really want to do is say, you'll start on a use case and then you go, well, hang on, this is where we are today. When you're picking that use case, try and think of where you're going to be in the future. So what can be a low cost solution for 2 or 3 guys in R&D can actually be very expensive if this use case works and you want to roll it out into the wider populace of your engineering team. So try and look at a sort of a 2-year and a 5-year, where you're going to be in 5 years. And if this goes well, what are the infrastructure costs, and how are you going to scale it? And also how are you going to manage that scalability? You know, if you've got 3 people dipping in and out of a project and changing things, it's easy to manage it. When you've got 200, and even just managing licenses, who has access to licenses and when, it soon becomes a problem. So make sure it's scalable and you've costed it out. The next one I'll throw over to Mark. You know, I sort of dabbled into the R&D there, but the R&D and then also the enterprise. So I'll throw that one over to you.
No, Chris, I agree with you on that. Is, you know, when you're getting started, it's very important that you have a team, and you talk about R&D and that small team of maybe 3 to 5 people who can really dive into the use case, prove out the use case, and really get familiar with the software and the hardware. I mean, that's really important as well. And then as this group does roll it out into I guess the real production world, where you're going to have multiple users, multiple sites, multiple locations, multiple countries in some cases. You do have to be ready to not only be flexible with your licensing, but also be able to expand on those licenses when you need to. And, you know, scalability is huge, because you could start out with one little use case, and within 3 months, you got 3 or 4 different use cases, and you need, you know, X amount of more licenses and more hardware. So be prepared and be ready to do it, but make sure you have a strong group there that can lead this project.
Have anything to add on there?
Yeah, so I think, especially if you're thinking about scaling up, you're looking at the next 2 to 5 years, you definitely want to involve other stakeholders from other departments involved really early on in the journey, because they could bring to the table other use cases, other problem areas, other pain points that you may not have thought of or may not even come across yourself. So they can really help justify that sort of expansion. And also, one of the most important things is involving IT really early in the journey, because when you come to scale up, you've found your use cases, you've successfully tested, you want to try and deploy that, you will hit a roadblock if you haven't involved IT really early in the journey. So you need them to be on board, you need them to do the testing, you need to make sure that you've complied with any security regulations within the company to deploy these sort of technologies on the network, especially if you want to link this to your PLM, where it's more accessible for engineers to access. You definitely want to involve IT really early to make it more of a smooth adoption throughout the whole organization.
Okay. I think we're thinking, 2 years, 5 years, make sure you future-proof it, that you don't go down a particular, you've solved a problem today that you can't scale, you can't go anywhere. And that leads also into, making sure that that the XR technologies you're going to move to suit the use case. And by that, one of the things, again, we come back to collaboration, is make sure that you kind of go down an agnostic approach, because if you're using collaboration, it can be very limiting if everybody has got to have the same device to come into a collaboration session. Mm-hmm. Now, we've tackled this by We have a desktop app, so we can even do a collaboration on a mobile phone or a tablet. So if you're not able to make it to the office or wherever your headset is, you can still join the session and still have some input. Now, you're going to not have the full experience of, full scale, full immersive 3D, but at least you're there. But also then we can mix up AR, MR, and VR. So mix up our devices. When we talk about devices, Mark, you've been involved in this a while, and you've seen some devices come and go. Anything you want to add on there?
No, I mean, the fact that we're device agnostic is huge, because all of our applications work for any of the devices. And when you think of specific use cases, you have in one particular case where our customers are actually going out into the field, into their plant. Well, you can't do it tethered to a computer, right? So VR is probably not the best application for that. So they have the Microsoft HoloLens, where they're able to take that right out into the field and have their files cached to the HoloLens and be able to work right in the field and have the full view. And we have other customers, obviously, that virtual reality is a better choice in, especially with factory layout, where you're laying out a whole plant. Virtual reality works great with that. But again, when you talk about the scalability and the ability to utilize these different devices, and the fact that our software works with all of them is a huge advantage when you're planning out your roadmap for XR.
Dev, anything to add on that? Especially, I know you've done a bit of work on sort of the size of data and how that can cause issues.
Yeah, so I think it all goes back to the use case. So whatever use case you've identified, try and understand where in the sort of design cycle it is. Is it earlier on during the concept stages, or is it later on in the design stages? So if you're looking at a early concept stage use case, for example, a factory layout, you may not have a physical facility present where you can actually go and do your virtual walkthrough. So virtual reality would be the best option there, because you could be fully immersed virtually and look at a layout that you've took from CAD and translated into VR, or you're in VR and you're creating your layout in virtual reality. So during the early stages, that will be more beneficial. But during the later stages, where maybe you have a physical facility present, you can actually take that virtual reality layout that you've created and put it onto a mixed reality headset like the HoloLens. And this is where being device agnostic is beneficial, because you're taking that data you already have, putting it on the HoloLens, and you can actually do a virtual walkthrough in the physical facility, so you can make those decisions much more fluidly. Also consider the size of data. So large data sets will typically function much better on a virtual reality device, because it could be powered by a powerful graphics card. On the HoloLens, it can be a bit of a problem to render really large data sets. This is where optimization can help. Also, something like a remote rendered approach, where something that Theorem does support, would definitely help for that sort of situation.
Okay. And you sort of touched on optimizing the data there. That's kind of a topic in itself. Knowing what optimization is needed is also an important thing. So Deb mentioned there, moving from VR to MR. We have a processing optimization pipeline that allows you to define recipes, so a route through our optimization to suit the use case, but also suit the device. You can predefine and save those, but also when you run the optimization process, it can output 3 or 4 different outputs. So if you're looking at a particular factory layout and you go, these guys have got HoloLens, they're going to site, I need a more heavily optimized data set, they'll save them in project A. These other guys are back in the office and they've got VR. I don't need to optimize it so much, and they want to start looking a bit more at the detail of the some of the equipment in that layout, I'll do a lighter optimization, and they're in their VR. And also we have some other things there for waypoints, where when you're in the HoloLens, you can predefine on your desktop, these guys, I want to have the canteen's going to be of interest, the end of production is going to be of interest, the loading bay is going to be interest. So you can drop in waypoints. So when you're in the HoloLens, you can actually bring the model to you. Obviously, you can't be walking 400 yards to the end of the factory or climbing upstairs to a mezzanine floor in a HoloLens. So the waypoints is a very useful tool, but you need to be in the desktop or the VR app to really drop them in and understand where you're moving around in that. I've kind of gone on a bit there on optimization, so as I usually do. Sorry, Mark. Have you got anything to add on there, Mark, or do you want to jump straight over to Dev on some of his?
No, I think you did a great job covering it, and obviously the importance of optimizing it for each device is great, and another huge advantage for Theorem. But I know this is Dev's expertise, and he's chomping at the bit, so we'll get it over to Dev and let him explain.
There you go, the hot potato, Dev. Over to you.
So again, I'm going to touch on use case again because it's the most important part. So if we're looking at optimization, look at your use case. So large scale data sets like a factory, you're typically going to assess sort of spatial assessments, look at accessibility, things like that. So small details aren't really important in those sort of use cases. So you can optimize the data by removing certain small components. So we have in our visualization pipeline optimization techniques where you can define a bounding box and remove anything within that bounding box. So whatever fits into that, it will be removed. So things like small nuts and bolts, things like that, they're not really important in factory layouts. You're not going to look at that and miss anything. So you can completely remove them out. And because you're looking at more the spatial side of things, you can actually take a bit more of a heavy or drastic approach to optimization, optimizing these triangles as well. It's just reducing the quality, but it helps a lot with the performance. So that will definitely help with the large data sets. But if you're in a design review where you're focusing on small assemblies or small components, you'll focus on this data set, and the quality is going to be important because you want it to look visually appealing. You want to make sure you're not missing any data. You want to trust the data that you see. So you don't want to take a drastic approach to optimizing that data because you want to keep the quality. So you can take a slight approach, but you can use things like shrink wrapping, another technique that we support, where you can remove certain internal parts, things that aren't visible, can be removed. So within an engine, for example, you may not be looking at that in the design review, you're just looking at the outer sides. So you can remove them completely and it will improve the performance on that side of things as well. So it depends, and you can also do a hybrid approach as well. So you may want to optimize certain components more. You might have other components from suppliers, for example, that you might want to keep the detail on. You might want to shrink wrap some parts. So you can, depends on your use case. You can, use a hybrid approach.
I think that's you kind of touched on something there that I just want to bring. So also, when you're looking at certain design review, not so much maybe you got probably a bit of NX data and a bit of CATIA and maybe a bit of Creo data all in one model. It's not so much of an issue. When you start looking at factory layout and you want to bring in scan data, you've got SolidWorks for your conveyor or some of your machinery. And then for the components, you could be back to CATIA because you've got a gearbox or an engine component that you want to bring into the factory layout. So being able to bring in and merge all of those different CAD inputs and scan inputs into one scene is quite important. So the agnostic upfront is as important on the inputs as the device on the outputs. Otherwise, you're going to find you're limiting yourself and you're having to play with lots of different file formats to squeeze it into a scene. The other thing we kind of is easier to show, but we're not going to be able to do that today. But Dev, you're the sort of technical guy here. So another hot potato, I'll just throw this with me and Mark will just sit back and nod and smile like we know what you're talking about. Is when the data is not optimized correctly, how it can kill a case, a use case, and especially when you start putting it in front of management. So I think if you've got any points to raise on that, it'd be quite an important one.
Yeah, definitely. For new users, especially senior management, first-time users of XR, you want to give them a good impression of this sort of technology. They're new to it. You want it to be adopted around the business. So it's got to run smoothly. It's got to look good. They've got to trust the data. More importantly, that's the main thing. They have to trust what they see. So the frame rate has to be high to get all of this. So if it's not optimized and your data is heavy, you're going to have a low frame rate. So there's going to be a lot of lag, it's going to be jittering a lot, and the user experience is going to be poor. So it can lead to things like sickness, headaches, not making the correct decisions, not seeing the correct data. So it is really important to make sure you have the right device and it's optimized for that device, so you can have the best possible experience for the users.
Yeah,
so, yeah,
definitely.
I think that's and I was talking to someone a couple of days ago, and they were still saying, I'm not getting on with VR at all. We were trying to squeeze a use case that should be in VR into MR just because they were having issues, and it's back to this frame rate, and also you have to kind of build up in VR. The first time you jump in, after 10 minutes, you're kind of tired and had enough, but you do get better the more often you use it. We're kind of at the end of the topic. Is there anything else that you want to throw in there at all, Mark? I don't know if I've probably ridden roughshod over most of your topics. So if there's anything you think I missed there, please throw it in.
No, I mean, I think you've done a great job covering it. And I think as people are starting out on their journey, I think it's really important to understand, obviously what your use case is. And if you have a firm understanding of that and a good team that can really start to invest in XR, not only in the hardware and the software, but the time to learn it and to really understand it, that's where you're going to find your success throughout your whole organization.
Yeah.
And what's great about Theorem is we're a very scalable solution. So you can start with one of our applications, whether it's our visualization app, and move right into design review and factory layout without missing a beat. You can just very easily can do it.
And I think you kind of touched on another point. I just want to sort of put that in bold, is you will need to find a champion, someone that wants to put the effort into this, because it's not going to run on itself. You will just end up with some devices with dust on them if you don't find a champion that's got the sort of fortitude and to run with this and keep pushing it into your business. So make sure you've got the energy to start the journey, or you find somebody else who has. So we're coming to the end now. So thank you very much for your time. Sorry about the lack of video. As I say, we will add those in when you get to the recording through. These are kind of our experiences and our comments. If you agree, disagree, or you have any questions that we've not answered, please send them over. If you reply to the invite, that'll go to our marketing, or if you go to our website, just sales@theorem.com. There's an email address there. We'll receive that. We can answer any of your questions that we've not covered. And yeah, follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter. All the events we tend to put on LinkedIn, and we also put quite a few little snippets of videos of what the guys have done and what we've been playing with lately. So if you follow Theorem on LinkedIn, you'll see those as they come through. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you all have a good evening or a good day, Mark. Thanks to Dev, thanks to Mark, and we'll see you again soon. So take care now. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.